NewFoundReality podcast number 5. uh, Again, several years ago, when this podcast started, taking shape, I never realized that several years later I would be here on my own delivering this message. It took so many lives to bring this to existence. And just because I promised my friends that I would actually, deliver these messages, I'm doing it. Otherwise, I find it all so funny and kind of, I guess it's like a parody on life, really. Sometimes the reality is so much worse than anything we can really imagine. A few years ago, when I was going through my own separation from my own family, and it was a very difficult time for myself. Plus, it was during that first wave of Corona times, and we were all kind of figuring out what is going to happen. We were predicting the end of the world. I remember that we were expecting so many people would die, and this would be pretty much the end of the world that we know. And in many ways, the world changed. Corona brought out so many changes to ourselves, to the way we see the world, to the way we exist within the world. Look at what happened to online learning, online dating. Everything moved online. We realized that we don't really have to do anything in real life. So in many ways, a lot of these things that I'm talking about in this podcast already exist. For example, the legalization of sex work. You can go online now and basically meet pretty much anyone, anytime, for anything. It's never been easier to meet another person, whether it's just for dating or casual sexual encounters of any nature. Jokingly, I always say that your internet, search history or Google knows more about you than you ever will know. A famous philosopher said once that no man is a stranger but to himself. So in many ways we don't really know ourselves, but the reality is that we do give out these information about ourselves freely. So let's say our partners who live with us, our kids, our family knows everything about us, but we don't, which sometimes doesn't really work in our favor, because our closed ones don't really want to share their information, with ourselves. Interesting. So perhaps I can, instead of going back to episode 5 to talk about euthanasia and capital punishment, I can move on to episode 6. Or this is episode 6 now, I don't even know, let me see. And try to conclude or bring in another element to this podcast. And this one is emotional currency. I think that the most important element in any sort of communication between two individuals is that emotional exchange. Whether that's with friends or with family or with our loved ones, your relationship is as good as the amount of energy and the emotions you put into it. There's an expression in English to do something half-assed, which means not fully and completely. But when you engage into some kind of relationship or some kind of work with your full heart, when you give it your all, then you realize how important this is to the final outcome. They say that cooks that love their food or love their jobs create food that actually nourishes our body. When you go to a McDonald's, which is fast food restaurant, that food has no soul. As simple as that. Excuse me. African Americans talk about it. Sometimes they say that, our food has soul. And truly, you can eat seemingly the unhealthiest food in the world and still live a long and happy life without any problems, because this food has been blessed by you or by the people preparing it. In Islam they have something called halal food, which is a way of preparing or raising an animal for consumption. And it might not be the best possible way. I mean, there's no perfection in this world really, but it's still, having organic food definitely means so much more than having, food that is kind of raised within these big industries and big companies. So everything that we do translates into some kind of final product. So as a musician, as a cook, as a CEO, as a janitor, if you bring in your heart and soul to this thing that you're doing, then it's going to have an effect on your final product. That is the most important element of this emotional currency that I'm trying to suggest. So in order for us to make use of these new technologies, we should be able to measure the actual amount of emotional input we put into our work. And that can be visible even with the naked eye. But we can use technology to measure this, to see whether we can actually do something, for the sake of doing it or not. If we do something with our full effort, we should be reimbursed for it. If you bring happiness and joy to your workplace, then you should get rewarded for it. If you bring sadness and misery, and if you do something that you don't like to do, then you're not going to be able to do it. But how do you make people excited about working as a janitor or working as a dishwasher? By rewarding them properly. Emotional currency should translate into hard currency. So if you're a happy janitor that goes around and does his work, to the best of his or her ability, you should get just as much money as the CEO of that company. And that's the key. That's the key, because in the end there is no company without that janitor. Once we understand that we are all equally important, then we can move on to other higher levels of consciousness. That has to happen at a really, really, really higher level. We say that you don't clean the fish from the tail but from the head. So this kind of new system has to be established from the top. I'll give you an example again from former Yugoslavia, in which we had these 88 rose parks. So each city had a park with 88 roses, and they represented the 88 years of President Tito. Our beloved leader died when he was 88 years old, and we decided to commemorate his death by putting up these parks around the country with 88 roses. And you know what? In every city there was such park, yet no one would ever go and pick one of those flowers or destroy that park. In our apartment building we also had 8 apartments. There's something about number 8 which brings abundance. And we didn't have actually a janitor, to clean that, but each family would be in charge of cleaning that hallway once, a week. So every 8 weeks, it would be your turn to clean, and you would do it, gladly, because realizing that this all belongs to you. Another example is that we just simply wouldn't litter, we wouldn't throw cigarette butts on the floor because we realized that the road belonged to us. I mean, how developed do you have to be, to do that? Yesterday I met a friend who had a candy and the candy wrapper fell down, and she picked up the candy wrapper and put it in her bag to put it later in a garbage can. So we are there as humanity, we are there. We can pick up after ourselves, but there needs to be some kind of reward established for it. We really should go after the positive reinforcement and make sure that we reward the people who are contributing to this society. The opposite is happening. The people who do show up for work, especially in service industry, we end up abusing them. Look at our nurses. They work like 12-hour shifts, and they get so much abuse. They don't have enough time off. I mean, at some point they'll burn down. The 4-day week is all we need. That's all we can really contribute to the society. We need a 3-day, weekend. And we have enough people to cover everything. We have enough schools, we have enough everything. But following the third principle of this which is the abolishment of private property, all of these systems have to be put into place that they support the society and the workers. So if you have a desire to go to school, you should be able to go to school for free. Providing that you provide something later on to the community. Again, it's all about being a contributing member of society. Very, very important things. Finally, in the last chapter, we're going to talk about the shaming strategy of, public display of socioeconomical status. In many ways, we have to find out who is organizing all this, and they have to be held accountable. We really need to invest into sharing, because capitalism has brought us so far, and it stopped. We thought that somehow the market would solve everything, but it doesn't. It will eventually, but it's going to be deadly for a lot of people in the meantime. So we want to find a way to, in the most eco-friendly way, solve this particular problem. If there's too many people, sure, let's deal with that. But there's a way to do that in a transparent way in which nobody really has to get hurt. In the meantime, this living is going to become more and more difficult because as you can see, we have problems in housing, problems in health, problems in education, problem in workforce in general, because there has been a complete mismanagement in needs and the workforce that we have. So we have too many of one thing and not enough of another thing, and it's really translating into a disaster of epic proportions. Whether you're traveling or whether you are, applying for a passport or getting a shot at the local hospital or seeing a dentist, it's mayhem. It's complete mayhem. So following these new modes of production, we might be able to move into something a little bit better. I'm repeating myself again because I'm trying to drive these points home and finally conclude this podcast so I can move on to something more pragmatic. My kids were here to visit me and we played some cards and enjoyed ourselves. And I realized that there's so much more that I could be talking about, that is a little bit more important. Today I made a post also saying that, in words of Rumi, yesterday I was foolish and I tried to change the world, and today I'm wise and I'm trying to change myself. I realize that all this change starts with me. I'm the one who can be more romantic in my relationship. I'm the one who can be more hardworking at my job. I'm the one who can do more with my children and being a better parent. But it really takes a community. Me trying to be a better person is not gonna work if the society is not going to support me. And the society depends on me. So a happy citizen creates a happy society, and a happy society creates a happy citizen. It is definitely an equal exchange of energy. And for that, we really need to work with these things. We need full control of our own life. We need a full integration of our institutions and organizations with an individual. At this point, nothing like that is happening. Schools are not teaching, hospitals are not curing, and the companies or food companies are not feeding us well. Everything seems to be poison and not good for us. Why do we have so many McDonald's? Why don't we have like healthy restaurants that serve healthy food and provide wholesome entertainment? Why can't McDonald's be a place where you can go to play some board games with your family and drink organic kiwi juice? You can get just as much money for that. Very simple solution. But it seems to me, again, to go back to the point of profit, everything seems to be, profit driven. And because it's profit driven, it's not going to turn into anything holistic. Making that profit right now is going to affect us down the road. We saw that the Industrial Revolution is definitely the end of the road. The end of the road. We are moving into a new world, and this is why this podcast is about NewFoundReality, or the New World Manifesto, which is basically going towards full integration of humanity with artificial intelligence through use of chipping, which are going to push us and force us into this new form of slavery, which are going to be completely different. In many ways, we are already in that matrix, and we cannot escape it. Having these, outlets such as, free sex, free love, provided by ourselves, we might be able to avoid some of this integration. Having more support towards our marriages and our family unit through, an involvement of government and government organizations and full support might help. Taking away all the private property and distributing it evenly to absolutely everyone might help as well, because our housing problem is huge. Finally, giving people a chance to opt out through euthanasia and the capital punishment is a viable way of dealing with undesirables. I might be an undesirable element of this society. That remains to be seen. We can also decide as society who might be, or some people might actually opt out not to be a part of it. And finally, what I talked about in this particular episode is the emotional currency, which was number 5, and I guess this would make episode 6. I'm sure I forgot the number. Finding a way to actually see how we can contribute to this society in a meaningful way. And that goes back to having equal payments and basic income to everybody, so we can actually contribute to our work in a meaningful way. And by giving us less work and distributing work across the whole workforce, because at this point 1/3 of our population is not being utilized, and the other third is unable to be utilized, while 1/3 supports everybody else, including the elite. So there you go. I have one more episode of these shenanigans, and I can move on to something a little bit more fun, I would think, newfound fun. Nevertheless, I am really dedicate these episodes to my good friends in Cabot Street who left all these episodes in my own personal amanet, which is a word for inheritance to be delivered to the world. Love you all and see you in the next video. Be good to yourselves.